The heavy, lead crystal goblets sitting atop the hand-carved mahogany dining table clinked softly as 23-year-old Chloe tossed a thick, silver-embossed envelope across the white linen tablecloth. It slid past the ice-filled silver champagne cooler and came to a stop directly beside my simple glass of tap water. "I think it's better if you don't come, Evelyn," Chloe said, her voice unnaturally flat, completely devoid of affection, not even bothering to lift her eyes to meet mine. Julian's family belongs to top-tier high society. His father is the chief executive officer of Prescott Defense Dynamics, and half the guest list consists of high-ranking military commanders, senators, and foreign diplomats. You're just a retired female army medic with short hair, calloused hands, and no sense of high fashion. You'll embarrass me in front of my new family. Sitting right beside her was Vanessa, Chloe's biological mother, a woman who had abandoned 4-year-old Chloe 15 years ago when times were tough, only to resurface 6 months ago when she smelled the Prescott family's multi-million-dollar defense fortune. Vanessa smirked, taking a slow sip of her imported French champagne, swirling her massive diamond rings in the flickering candlelight. "Chloe is absolutely right, dear," Vanessa purred smoothly, resting a manicured hand with red acrylic nails on Chloe's forearm. "A high society wedding requires elegance, poise, and pedigree. A woman who spent 20 years of her life trudging around in dusty combat boots and camouflage fatigues just doesn't fit into a 5-star cathedral setting. We certainly don't want the international guests confusing the groom's stepmother with the venue's private security detail." I sat quietly in my tailored black suit. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't let my hands shake. I didn't shed a single tear. And I didn't reach across the table to demand back the $30,000 in hard-earned cash I had quietly wired to the venue 3 months ago to cover Chloe's dream floral arrangements, catering deposits, and custom bridal gown. "I understand, Chloe," I said softly, keeping my posture straight and my tone unyielding. "If my presence brings you shame after everything we have built together over the last 15 years, I will not attend." Chloe let out a long, audible sigh of relief, leaning back and picking up her wineglass. "Good, because Julian managed to secure an incredible honor for our ceremony. Since my biological father passed away, Julian's father pulled massive political strings to get 4-star General Thomas Vance, the legendary commander of Joint Special Operations Command, to walk me down the aisle. A 4-star general, Evelyn? Can you even imagine? The entire venue will be packed with military brass, and I need everything to be absolutely flawless." She looked at me with smug satisfaction, believing she had delivered the ultimate emotional put-down. She had no idea that 4-star General Thomas Vance was the exact man who owed his life, his military career, and his 4 gold stars to the quiet, short-haired female officer sitting right across from her. The 15-year sacrifice and the toxic return. To understand how a 23-year-old bride could throw away the woman who raised her, you have to understand the deep, invisible sacrifices that quiet mothers make behind closed doors. My name is Major Evelyn Cross. I am 39 years old. For 2 decades, I served as a combat trauma specialist and operational medical officer in the United States Army. I deployed 6 separate times into extreme-risk operational zones across the Middle East and Central Asia. I spent the prime of my youth living in body armor, working in dark forward surgical tents, pulling wounded operators out of burning tactical vehicles, and earning a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star with valor for actions carried out under direct enemy mortar and heavy machine gun fire. 15 years ago, when I was 24 and stationed at Fort Bragg, I met David, a gentle, hard-working civilian logistics manager whose wife, Vanessa, had just packed her bags and walked out on him and their 4-year-old daughter, Chloe. Vanessa had found David's modest salary too boring, his lifestyle too simple. She cleared out their joint savings account, packed her designer luggage, and vanished into thin air, leaving David alone in a rented bungalow with a heartbroken, weeping little girl who spent her nights crying at the front window, asking why her mother didn't love her anymore. When David and I married 2 years later, I stepped into little Chloe's life, not as a bossy replacement, but as a rock-solid anchor. I was the one who stayed up until 3 in the morning, sitting on the cold bathroom tiles, holding Chloe's hair, and wiping her forehead with damp towels when she suffered from severe flu fevers. I was the one who learned how to braid her hair before taking her to primary school, holding her small hand tightly, while David worked 16-hour double shifts at the distribution center to pay off the debts Vanessa had left behind. When I was deployed overseas to active war zones, I recorded 40 audio tapes reading her bedtime stories so she could hear my voice every single night before sleeping. I sent home every single cent of my hazard deployment pay to establish a tax-free college trust fund for her future. When David tragically died of a sudden massive heart attack 5 years ago, Chloe was 18 and completely crushed by grief. Rather than letting her fall apart, I took on 2 additional tactical consulting jobs alongside my active military duties to ensure she never had to drop out of her private university. I paid for her tuition, her apartment rent, her medical insurance, her textbooks, and every single meal she ate. I never asked for public applause. I never demanded a medal at home. I raised Chloe on a simple principle my father taught me. Real love is proven through silent, unyielding action, not loud promises. Then came Julian Prescott. Julian was 25 years old, polished, smooth-talking, and dripping with generational wealth. His father, Harrison Prescott, was the founder and CEO of Prescott Defense Dynamics, a massive billion-dollar defense contractor in Northern Virginia that manufactured military satellite communication systems. Julian had never worked in a physical shift in his life, spending his time driving foreign sports cars, lounging at private country clubs, and living off his father's trust fund. When Chloe began dating Julian 18 months ago, something fundamental inside her character warped. The humble, sweet girl I had raised began absorbing the hollow vanity of Julian's high society circle. She began obsessing over designer handbags, country club memberships, elite titles, and social prestige. She became self-conscious about our modest suburban home and stopped inviting her college friends over. And then, 6 months ago, Vanessa magically reappeared in town. Having heard through mutual acquaintances that her daughter was about to marry into the multi-million-dollar Prescott Defense dynasty, Vanessa suddenly developed an overwhelming maternal longing. She flew back into D.C., wearing cheap fake jewelry, dripping in heavy perfume, and instantly began whispering toxic poison into Chloe's ear every single day. "Your stepmother is just a rough, low-class military woman," Vanessa told Chloe repeatedly over expensive brunches that Chloe paid for. "Look at her. She works with her hands, she wears plain suits, she doesn't go to luxury spas, and she has military scars. If Julian's elite family sees her sitting at the head table, they'll think you come from poor, working-class stock." Instead of standing up for the woman who had dried her tears for 15 years, Chloe allowed Vanessa's poison to take deep root in her soul. She became visibly embarrassed whenever I visited her campus, cringing at my short military haircut and the faint shrapnel scar running down the left side of my neck. When the wedding planning began, Chloe demanded a $100,000 luxury ceremony at the historic St. Jude's Cathedral in downtown Washington, D.C. When the total venue fees and catering deposits exceeded Julian's expectations, Chloe came to my house in tears, weeping on my kitchen counter, begging me to help her avoid public embarrassment. Quietly, without telling Julian, his arrogant father, or Vanessa, I withdrew $30,000 from my operational retirement savings, money I had earned while bleeding in foreign deserts, and paid off the cathedral's master balance directly. Chloe squeezed my hand, smiled warmly, and promised me the head guest seat right beside her late father's framed photograph. 2 weeks before the wedding, at the private rehearsal dinner held at an ultra-exclusive French restaurant, Vanessa and Chloe delivered the strike. The rehearsal dinner and the arrogant elites. The private dining hall at L'Orangerie smelled of vintage wine, white truffles, expensive cigars, and corporate arrogance. Harrison Prescott, Julian's billionaire father, sat at the head of the long marble table, sipping scotch, surrounded by defense executives, lobbyist partners, and local politicians. Vanessa sat right beside Harrison, laughing loudly at his dry jokes, fluttering her eyelashes, pretending to be an aristocrat who had raised Chloe in luxury. Chloe sat next to Julian, clinging to his arm like a trophy. I sat quietly near the far end of the table, dressed in a simple, immaculate dark suit, listening in silence as Harrison bragged about his company's geopolitical influence. "We just finalized a $30 million DoD communications contract," Harrison announced loudly, raising his glass of vintage scotch to the table. The Pentagon listens when we speak. In fact, for the wedding this Saturday at St. Jude's, I personally reached out to top contacts in the Department of the Army. I managed to secure 4-star General Thomas Vance himself. He's the commander of USACOM. Since Chloe's biological father passed away, General Vance agreed to personally walk my new daughter-in-law down the aisle. It's going to be featured on the front page of the DC Social Registry. The table erupted into loud, theatrical applause. Vanessa clapped frantically, leaning over to whisper into Harrison's ear with a coy smile. "Oh, Harrison, that is breathtaking," Vanessa chirped smoothly. "A 4-star general. Only the absolute highest caliber of escort for our sweet little girl." Chloe was glowing with pride, sitting up taller in her chair. "General Vance is a national icon. Having him walk me down the aisle will prove to everyone in DC that I belong at the absolute top tier of society." Julian smirked, turning his arrogant eyes toward my end of the table. "Yeah, well, we just need to make sure the venue looks pristine. We can't have random people showing up looking like off-duty security guards or low-level foot soldiers ruining the photos." Vanessa laughed softly behind her silk napkin. "Don't worry, Julian. Chloe and I have already taken care of the guest list details." After the dinner concluded, and the guests began moving outside toward the valet parking bay, Chloe called me over to a dim stone courtyard behind the restaurant. Vanessa stood right behind her, arms crossed over her chest, a triumphant smirk plastered across her face. That was when Chloe pulled the silver-embossed invitation out of her purse and handed it back to me. "I think it's better if you don't come, Evelyn," Chloe said, her voice flat, devoid of any warmth or emotion. "Julian's family is top-tier high society. You're just a retired army medic with short hair and calloused hands. You'll embarrass me." I stood under the warm yellow street lamps of Washington, D.C., looking directly into the eyes of the girl I had fed, clothed, comforted, and protected for 15 years. "Chloe," I said, my voice measured and calm, "I raised you for 15 years. I paid for your college degree. I paid $30,000 out of my personal retirement savings for your floral arrangements, venue deposits, and bridal gown just 3 weeks ago." Vanessa stepped forward aggressively, her voice sharp and dripping with condescension. "Oh, please, Evelyn. Don't try to guilt-trip the poor girl with your little savings account. You did what any hired caretaker would do, but this is an elite high society event. General Thomas Vance will be walking Chloe down the aisle. Do you really think a 4-star military titan wants to sit anywhere near a middle-aged female grunt who spent her life in dusty medic tents?" Chloe looked away, staring at the stone pavement, refusing to meet my eyes. "It's final, Evelyn. Don't come to the cathedral. If you show up, security will turn you away at the archway. I want my real mother sitting in the front row, and I don't want any awkward questions about why my stepmother looks like a drill instructor." I looked at Chloe for a long 5 seconds. I didn't yell. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't degrade myself by begging for her gratitude. "Very well, Chloe," I said softly, taking a step back. "I hope your wedding gives you everything you think you deserve." I turned around, walked to my 10-year-old practical sedan, and drove home through the quiet streets of the city. The cathedral, the unexpected guest, and the 4-star salute Saturday afternoon arrived under a crisp, clear blue autumn sky. St. Jude's Cathedral was a breathtaking masterpiece of Gothic stone architecture. Massive stained glass windows cast deep ruby and gold sunlight across 300 high society guests, defense executives, political donors, foreign diplomats, and high-ranking military officers in polished dress blues filled the dark mahogany pews. At the front of the altar stood Julian Prescott in a custom tuxedo, flanked by his father, Harrison, and 5 groomsmen. Sitting in the very front row on the bride's side was Vanessa, dressed in an emerald green gown, wearing glittering diamond necklaces, fanning herself with smug satisfaction. Chloe stood in the grand marble vestibule at the back of the cathedral, holding her bouquet of rare white orchids, her heart hammering against her ribs with excitement. She was waiting for her grand escort, 4-star General Thomas Vance. A heavy black armored government sedan pulled up to the front courtyard of the cathedral, escorted by 2 motorcycle police officers. Out stepped 4-star General Thomas Vance. He was 58 years old, broad-shouldered, with steel gray hair, wearing his pristine Army service uniform, his chest completely covered in 4 rows of high-level combat decorations, jump wings, and operational stars. Harrison Prescott rushed down the stone steps, beaming with pride, extending his hand enthusiastically. "General Vance, what an absolute honor, sir," Harrison cheered. "Thank you for accepting my invitation to walk my daughter-in-law down the aisle. The press is going to cover this for weeks." General Vance looked at Harrison with cold, piercing gray eyes, giving a brief, formal nod. "I am not here for your company's press coverage, Mr. Prescott. I accepted this request because I was informed that the bride was raised by a distinguished military family." Yes, of course," Harrison said quickly, escorting the 4-star general inside the vestibule. Inside the vestibule, Chloe gasped softly, bowing her head in excitement, as General Vance approached her. "General Vance, I can't believe you're really here. Thank you so much for walking me down the aisle." General Vance adjusted his white dress gloves, offering his right arm to Chloe. "It is my duty to support the families of our service members, young lady. Let us begin." The massive 10-foot oak doors of the cathedral swung open. The grand pipe organ erupted into the traditional bridal march. 300 elite guests stood up in unison, turning their heads toward the rear entrance. Chloe took General Vance's arm, holding her head high, floating with absolute arrogance as she began walking down the long red carpet toward the altar. Vanessa was wiping fake tears of joy in the front row, while Julian smiled proudly. They reached the halfway point of the long aisle. Then, General Vance's operational eyes casually swept past the rear pews near the grand stone archway. In the very last row, standing quietly in the shadows beside a massive marble column, was a single woman. She was not wearing an expensive evening gown. She was dressed in an unadorned, dark slate blue operational service dress uniform, carrying a simple leather bag. It was me. I hadn't come to cause a scene. I hadn't come to interrupt the ceremony. I had come simply to stand in the quiet shadows at the back of the room, watch the girl I raised walk down the aisle from 100 feet away, fulfill my final silent duty as a parent, and slip away quietly into the afternoon. General Vance froze dead mid-stride. He stopped so abruptly that Chloe stumbled forward, almost tripping over her heavy silk dress train. "General?" Chloe whispered frantically, trying to tug his arm forward. "What's wrong? Keep walking. Everyone is staring at us." General Vance didn't move an inch. His eyes were locked onto the back corner of the cathedral. His facial expression transformed instantly from polite military detachment to absolute stunned operational shock. "My God!" General Vance whispered under his breath. Without saying another word to Chloe, General Vance unlinked his arm from hers, turned his body completely around, and began marching rapidly back down the carpeted aisle, away from the altar, away from Julian, away from Harrison Prescott. The pipe organist froze, the music trailing off into an uncomfortable, deafening silence. The 300 guests gasped in confusion, turning around in their seats to watch the 4-star general march backward. "General Vance?" Harrison Prescott called out from the front row, taking a confused step forward. "Where are you going?" General Vance ignored everyone. He marched straight down the central aisle until he reached the very back row, stopping precisely 2 feet in front of me near the marble column. Before 300 stunned high society guests, the 4-star general snapped his boots together with an echoing crack, pulled his shoulders back, and rendered a crisp, unwavering 4-star military salute directly to my face. "Major Evelyn Cross," General Vance declared, his booming, authoritative voice echoing off the high stone arches of the cathedral. "I had no idea you were in Washington." I raised my hand, rendering a calm, precise return salute. "Good afternoon, General Vance." "It is good to see you, sir." General Vance dropped his salute, his face filled with deep, genuine respect. He turned his head slowly, looking at Chloe, who was standing frozen in the middle of the aisle, her mouth hanging open in horror. "General?" Chloe stammered, her voice cracking as she hurried back toward him. "Why are you saluting her? She's just my stepmother. She wasn't even invited." General Vance turned his body, glaring down at Chloe with an expression of terrifying command authority. "Just your stepmother?" General Vance repeated, his voice cutting through the silent cathedral like a razor blade. "Young lady, do you have any idea who this woman is?" Chloe swallowed hard, backing away slightly from the general's intensity. She was just a low-level army medic. Major Evelyn Cross, General Vance announced loudly, addressing the entire room of defense contractors, diplomats, and socialites, is the lead trauma surgeon who entered a burning, ambushed command vehicle in the Korangal Valley 12 years ago, under direct, heavy anti-tank and machine gun fire. She pulled 3 wounded operators out of the flames while suffering severe shrapnel burns across her own body. General Vance took a heavy step toward Harrison Prescott and Julian, his voice booming like thunder. I was the colonel trapped inside that burning vehicle, Mr. Prescott. Major Cross performed an emergency field tracheotomy on me while mortar rounds were exploding 20 feet from our position. She saved my life. She saved my command team, and she earned the Distinguished Service Cross and 2 Purple Hearts under Executive Seal. A collective, violent gasp erupted through the 300 guests. Harrison Prescott's face turned completely ghost white. Julian looked as though he had been hit by a freight train. Vanessa dropped her silk fan onto the floor, staring at me in absolute, utter terror. General Vance turned his cold eyes back onto Chloe. You uninvited the woman who saved my life? You uninvited a decorated hero of the United States Armed Forces from your wedding because she didn't fit your shallow idea of high society? Chloe burst into tears of absolute humiliation, clutching her dress. General, I didn't know. My biological mother told me. Silence, General Vance barked, his voice echoing off the stained glass windows. You do not deserve to walk down this aisle under the protection of a military escort. You have insulted the uniform, you have insulted a national hero, and you have disgraced the very concept of family. General Vance turned back to me, his posture softening into deep respect. Major Cross, General Vance said softly, extending his arm toward me. It would be the greatest honor of my military career if you would permit me to walk you to the front row of this cathedral. I looked at General Vance, then looked at Chloe, who was weeping uncontrollably in front of 300 elite guests, who were now glaring at her with open disgust and contempt. Thank you, General, I said calmly, taking his arm. Lead the way. The devastating reckoning and the silent horizon. The high society wedding of Chloe and Julian Prescott transformed in a single minute from a grand display of wealth into a catastrophic, career-destroying public humiliation. As General Vance escorted me down the center aisle, 300 guests, including every military officer, senator, and defense executive in the room, stood up and clapped softly in reverence as I walked past. Harrison Prescott bowed his head in deep shame, completely unable to meet my eyes. General Vance personally led me to the front pew on the right side, seating me in the position of highest honor. When Chloe finally reached the altar alone, crying hysterically, the atmosphere inside the cathedral was dead and cold. The ceremony was rushed, silent, and completely devoid of joy. Nobody was looking at the bride's white dress or Vanessa's diamonds. Every eye in the room was fixed on the quiet, short-haired female veteran sitting calmly in the front row. The reception that followed at the Grand Washington Hotel was an absolute disaster for Vanessa and the Prescott family. The story of how Chloe and Vanessa had uninvited a decorated female war hero and paid $30,000 of her own personal money for the wedding flowers spread through D.C. high society like wildfire. Harrison Prescott was mortified. When senior defense officials at the reception asked Harrison why his son was marrying a girl who treated a combat hero like trash, Harrison publicly berated Vanessa in front of 50 guests, telling her that her toxic presence had ruined his family's political reputation. Within 48 hours of the wedding, Harrison stripped Julian of his executive vice president position at Prescott Defense Dynamics, transferring him to an unstaffed regional sales office in northern North Dakota to learn humility and work ethic. Vanessa, realizing that her dream of living a high society lifestyle through Chloe was completely ruined, packed her bags once again and fled town, abandoning Chloe for the second time in her life. 2 weeks after the wedding, I sat on the porch of my quiet home in Virginia, sipping black coffee in the cool morning air. A yellow cab pulled up to the driveway. Out stepped Chloe. She looked broken. Her eyes were red and swollen, her designer clothes replaced by a simple sweatshirt. She walked slowly up the wooden steps of the porch, holding a small paper envelope in her shaking hands. Evelyn, Chloe whispered, her voice trembling, Can I sit down? You can sit, Chloe, I answered quietly. She sat on the wooden bench across from me, crying quietly into her hands for a long time. Julian's family hates me, Chloe sobbed. Vanessa took $20,000 from my wedding gift fund and ran away to Florida. Julian moves to North Dakota next week, and he told me I have to pay my own way if I want to come with him. I ruined everything, Evelyn. I threw away the only real mother I ever had for people who discarded me the second things got hard. She reached into her bag and pulled out a bank envelope, setting it on the table. It's $5,000, Chloe wept. It's all I have left in my personal savings account. I know it's not the $30,000 you spent on my wedding, but I want to pay you back. I am so sorry, Evelyn. I was so blind. I was so arrogant. I looked at the envelope on the table. I looked at the girl I had raised from 4 years old. I didn't yell at her. I didn't gloat over her collapse. Keep your money, Chloe, I said softly, pushing the envelope back toward her. You don't owe me cash. You owed yourself character, discipline, and loyalty. You traded 15 years of real love for a few hours of fake applause in a cathedral. Can you ever forgive me? She sobbed, looking up at me with desperate eyes. I forgave you the moment I walked out of that cathedral, Chloe, I said calmly. Because anger is a heavy pack that I refuse to carry. But forgiveness does not mean things go back to how they were. You are a married woman now. You chose your path. Now you must walk it and learn how to become a person of real strength. I stood up, picked up my coffee mug, and looked out toward the morning horizon. Chloe sat on the porch for another hour, crying quietly, before picking up her bag and walking back down the driveway alone. I watched her go, feeling no malice, no bitterness, only a quiet, peaceful realization. True human authority and motherhood have never been defined by high society titles, expensive dresses, or public praise. Real strength sits in silence. It builds, it protects, it bleeds, and it endures. Those who build their lives on vanity and arrogance will always crumble when the storm arrives, while those built on honor, sacrifice, and quiet dignity will always stand unbroken. I took a sip of my coffee, adjusted my collar, and walked back inside my quiet home. Leave the word respect in the comments right now if you believe that true human worth and real parental love are proven through silent sacrifice, integrity, and character, never through arrogant grandstanding or shallow social status. Arrogance always demands a stage, but true honor stands firm in silence until the truth is revealed. And if this story reminded you to never judge a person's capability, sacrifice, or service by their modest cover, hit that subscribe button right now. Because tomorrow, I am bringing you the unbelievable story of a quiet 37-year-old female military mechanic who was publicly mocked and fired by a corrupt dealership manager, only for a 4-star armored convoy to pull into her small garage 3 hours later to hand her a multi-million-dollar defense maintenance contract. I'll see you in the next story.